You see, the thing about many of the older games is that they understood something that modern shooters have simply forgotten. They understood that sometimes less is more. This dry, rural setting was the perfect fit for Battlefield's large-scale mechanized warfare. Here, these giants dominated the landscape. Vast and exposed, the infantry are small, vulnerable, so have to rely on teamwork or die. Out in the open, the vast emptiness was the threat. Vehicles were psychologically present at all times. You could see threats developing from hundreds of meters away. You were negotiating with the battlefield. Jets screaming overhead, tanks trading fire across wide open terrain, while infantry tried to survive in the spaces between giants. Above all, Golmud Railway understood the power of one simple design element. Not empty space, but weaponized space. The space that separated armies. And in that space, Battlefield found scale. The kind of scale that made you feel like one small, insignificant soldier inside a war machine far bigger than yourself.
We've heard your feedback about the kind of map experience you want in Battlefield loud and clear. And that is why Season 3 opens with our reimagining of a classic Battlefield 4 map. Railway to Golmud.
Oh God! Oh God!
The differences between the BF6 and BF4 version of that map are mainly around balancing and cover. We've tried to add more cover opportunities for infantry to move around the map without having to cross so many huge fields and being easy targets. That was our focus, how we could maintain that crazy big sandbox where vehicles have a lot of fun and still provide really good opportunity for infantry play.
Oh! Now you fucked up! Now you fucked up! Now you fucked up! You have fucked up now!
Now I've put a number of hours into this map already as the headline piece of content brought into Season 3. One map, which is a remake, is all you get until sometime next month, where you will receive another remake, and that is simply not good enough. Again, this is drip feed content, none of which has done much to bring back any substantial player base. What DICE have produced here in this remake is completely disconnected from any of those classic philosophies around space, tactical gameplay, nothing. What they've made here is absolutely a mess. You asked and we listened. Really, the game needs a ton of large-scale maps right now. That doesn't mean go back and remake one map from a decade-old game and make it worse. When I hear crap about adding more cover, more opportunity for infantry to move around the map without having to cross any huge fields, as he says, that philosophy right there is exactly what has ruined this game, and it plays like absolute shit. I think it's safe to say at this point that the current dev team have no idea what they're actually doing in regards to making good quality maps, despite what they say, in particular with how they handle remakes. And again, those Battlefield shields have deployed to desperately bring as much attention to the franchise as possible. And people need to start calling this out. This is perfect. Battlefield 6 shows why big maps matter. Or Battlefield might actually be back now for the 100th time. And this newest update is actually game-changing.
Is actually dog shit!
At this point, I'm so damn tired of seeing the same half reload shit animation thumbnails regurgitated across the entire fucking discourse at this point every day. At some point you need to be creative. But again, that's all a symptom of how pale, generic and recycled AAA gaming has become. 60 to 90 bucks for a game that's not even providing half the content Battlefield 4 had at this point in time. Instead, it's recycling maps, designs, concepts, ideas, content, weapons, vehicles from decade-old games and drip feeding that out in months. So now the content is all subdivided and split up, forcing what little audience who do return less incentive to want to stick around. This update, this one map, hasn't actually brought anyone back. And what makes this whole thing interesting is how you can admit that you have better technology than you did 13 years ago, but simultaneously poke holes at the idea that you're somehow lacking time and resources. Can you make it make sense? Now, I think it's obvious at this point that the devs, the designers, this team, they had all the time and resources they needed to build this AAA game, but they couldn't because they're all the wrong people and they don't have the capacity. Now, the original Battlefield 4 Golmud Railway wasn't exactly an iconic map, but it definitely did Battlefield well. It was a gigantic armored sandbox built around distance, exposure, and scale. The terrain, it had breathing room. Tanks had room to maneuver. Helicopters could dominate the skylines. Infantry moved through fear-inducing open terrain, knowing visibility itself was part of the gameplay. The BF6 remake, Railway to Golmud, is designed under a very different philosophy. Every square meter must contain gameplay, and that changes the entire map. It's becoming abundantly clear to me that Battlefield 6 is the art of making a house a home. Now, what exactly do I mean by that? Let me tell you. If you paste that term into YouTube, I'm sure you'll find a bunch of females telling you about how important it is to decorate the house.
Hello Classic Crew, and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about how to make your house a home.
Go into a man's home and they live by themselves. They don't got much going on. They have very simple furniture,
But those
there's no decoration.
At the end of the 6 weeks, each team showed off their camps to Bear Grylls. The men's camp was very utilitarian, while the women's camp was very decorated and made over.
In this narrow worldview, these females believe the house is always empty, rendering the man into some useless idiot that just sits around all day. And so she must begin to decorate, to transform the house into a home, ignoring who built the house. Outside of those core elements from furniture, seating, cabinets, tables, lighting, TVs, and so on, which were all most likely put there by the man, you reach the point at which you're just adding shit that doesn't really need to be there. Pictures, flowers, ornaments, those books you're never going to read, those clothes you're never going to wear, and so on until everything begins to stack up like that pile of shit sitting in the corner of your room you think I can't see. In the extreme event, both men and women, but typically women, tend to hoard this useless shit. Yeah, they're known as hoarders. It's quite interesting. You should look it up. They do this usually to the point of neglect, where there's too much shit to even move around the house. Okay. Battlefield 6 is at that point, okay? This is, of course, a reflection of classic gender stereotypes. I am, of course, again, being facetious here. Men are typically focused on the larger goal at hand, in this case, building the house, all of those core structural elements, the foundations, etc. While females are typically more detail orientated. In that case, making the home, which involves decoration and all of that bullshit. In regards to Battlefield, we know this is a progressive studio. Inclusion and diversity are at the utmost importance here. So we need to represent that inclusion, which means we need to have females in leading roles to break gender stereotypes. Yes. And so we need to see female soldiers, and we need to see more people than ever before building our damn maps for no fucking reason. All of this, all these people are doing is simply decorating over existing maps. Now, in regards to Battlefield, those classic Battlefield maps, that was the house. Maps often felt authored by terrain designers. What you had here were terrain-first strong designs. You get the sense of real tactical strategy within these maps. These were large-scale combat thinkers. Any map on offer here had tons of open space and breathing room. The original Golmud, again, wasn't exactly an iconic map, but it felt like a true Battlefield map. The BF6 version feels more like a Battlefield-themed attraction park. The name itself feels like some kind of fantasy. Golmud Railway took itself seriously. Railway to Golmud? It does not. Narratively, we're looking at two really powerful factions. Russia and China smashing each other for complete domination on wide open terrain. Golmud Railway was fit for large-scale mechanized vehicular warfare, a giant landscape with huge valleys, rail lines under construction, sparse cover, open roads and distant ridge lines. This environment with its impressive scale was the battlefield, and the map was deliberately designed to be wide and open to provide the foundation for this epic mechanized warfare, leaving only craters, destroyed buildings, dust, smoke and wreckage for miles. Tanks dominated the landscape here. Choppers controlled the air. Jets turned the skies into a second battlefield. The infantry survived by merely reading the terrain, moving with purpose and understanding that openness itself was part of the combat. If you were caught out in the open, again, you're just getting shot. The industrial warehouses established the front line, providing wide open attack lanes. Beyond that, the railway valley opened into pure combined arms warfare. Tanks, infantry-focused vehicles, helicopters, jets, long sight lines created a constant awareness of the larger conflict unfolding around you. Combat was interconnected across massive distances, okay? And that space that changed what weapons became viable, making snipers, marksmen and machine gunners absolutely essential here for zone control and holding back the counter-attacking Russian forces. Then we have the villages. This whole area, it had sparse compounds acting as that secondary fallback. Surrounding this village are rigged IEDs, improvised explosive devices. When detonated, would blitz the entire site, completely decimating any armor in the area. And that feeds into the idea of a massive force breaking through battle lines as the defensive forces make their final stand, using civilian buildings and vacant homes as cover. Any building here could be completely destroyed. The addition of the artillery truck or commander mode offering supply crates, the AC-130 providing aerial support, or the Tomahawk missile to completely decimate the map, again added another layer, an additional tool for the player to make use of the existing scale. Again, the emphasis here is on space, clarity, and that breathing room to identify vehicles from a distance and take them out. So this was all the house, okay? It had all those structural elements there, and everything was built from the ground up on a terrain-focused design. And it was a unique original map. If we compare this to the remake we just got, the newer version of Golmud is undeniably more detailed, it's prettier, it's dense, it's vibrant, it's visually busy, but in many areas the map exchanges that clarity and atmosphere it once had in BF4 for decoration on steroids. I'm going to break this map into 3 distinct parts as it plays in Rush and Breakthrough, because from what I've played so far, this map is not great. To briefly summarize what's going on here, this table explains the core of what's actually going on. So again, many of those features can be broken down into distinct parts of this criticism here. But again, that chart basically forms the gist of what exactly is wrong with this remake. Now, for section 1 around the warehouses, this essentially is where the map begins. In Rush and Breakthrough, the attackers spawn behind the industrial warehouses, while the defenders spawn at the warehouses. In contrast to BF4, the attackers will spawn at the warehouses and attack the defenders at the train. So essentially they've already fallen into problem number 1 here, which happens in every fucking map at this point. You're spawning right in front of the fucking enemy, and there is simply no breathing room, no sight lines. Again, it's more compact, tons of shit all over the place. The designers also went with this pitched roof design, which now gives players more ways to hide on the roof and a skylight so they can drop down into the warehouse below. And the original design had flat roofs, so it was a lot easier to gauge targets and take out any roof campers. And again, tons of open space for vehicles around the warehouse to navigate. Now that area is completely decked out with useless tons of cover everywhere. Another interesting detail is that the original warehouses housed massive concrete elements and containers which felt like a storage zone for the construction project nearby for the bridge. And now that all seems to be just like one generic area in the warehouses where there just really doesn't share much connection to the site. It's quite strange. Essentially, this entire zone around the warehouses is reduced to close quarters combat and people are just spamming the SMGs and you've got people jumping on the rooftops and this entire location is a clusterfuck. Now, section 2 opens up to the rail line where we have the locomotive, and behind that is the village, which is the defense spawn. At this point, the map opens up for some really wide open flanks. We should be able to see a clear horizon and nice open landscapes, except at this point, we don't. Terrain that once communicated openness and vulnerability now feels padded with shit tons of assets. Again, what we see is clutter, micro cover, debris, rocks, fences, brick walls, containers, shrubs, trees, which literally turn into mini forests, and multiple layered geometry, which all combined to fucking destroy your PC. Can you please tell me why there needs to be cover all around a stationary terrain, concrete blocks, destroyed trucks, and a giant fucking rock in the middle of nowhere? And there's shrubs all over the place. It starts to get really irritating when you can't drive through certain areas without constantly banging into shit and getting stuck. And this also applies to when your boots on the ground, because you're constantly having to vault over objects, so your aim is constantly always thrown off. At this point, it becomes really clear that the remake reduces any sense of atmosphere, any sense of scale or tension significantly. Instead of one massive connected combat ecosystem, everything is now split into lanes and sections, and the map is broken into pieces by all the asset congestion. So, for example, you will see clusters of trees and rocks everywhere, and this splits the map into lanes, forcing vehicles to move down linear paths, again constantly, as you can see here. Again, it's all visually pretty, but in practice, when I have to get into a vehicle just to mow down the site every time I play this map, that's a problem. You know, it's like they had no discipline at all with the asset placement. And as a result, ground vehicles on this map suffer greatly by this problem. The little bird that the attackers have here, I've always been a massive fan of this one vehicle, particularly in classic games like BF3 and BF4. This was my favorite vehicle. However, in this game, on this map in particular, it's really overpowered, and yet somehow it's also awkward to use at the same time. There's just something really wrong with how this vehicle feels. It seems a lot heavier than it used to be, and you can often find yourself just blazing through people for extended periods of time. It's almost as if people haven't figured out how to counter this vehicle, and for some reason they've given the little bird the ability to spam rockets now, so it's even easier to take out the infantry. The locomotive also now has tons more shit on it. Lots of containers to hide in, and even placing an objective inside one of these containers. And again, that makes the fight a lot more complicated than it needs to be compared to the original. And that, when you look at the original, again, that locomotive was delivering prefabricated concrete structures to the site, again, for that bridge construction. So again, it had a connection to the site, and in the remake it's just bullshit everywhere once again. And again, in BF4, that train was iconic. I was really skeptical in the past about them potentially ignoring the train as a mobile spawn point element, but they have added it here, so they do get some browning points for that. But in Conquest, in BF4, that train often drifted toward one side of the map and stayed there. In BF6, it still follows the same principle, but it also has all this junk connected to it, again adding more cover and making shit complicated once again. Now in BF6, the railway is no longer just a landmark cutting through the open terrain. Here it actually has a reason the battle exists. So NATO and Pax Armata are fighting for control over movement itself, supply, reinforcement, etc. So again, on the train you actually see tanks and vehicles connected to it as it's delivering the war machine to the site. Now I think this is one massive missed opportunity here, because what they could have done here is something really interesting with Breakthrough by bringing back the armored gun train as a behemoth. If you remember back in BF1, the armored train there, that was a behemoth that completely dominated sections of the map to reinforce the infantry. They could have used that exact same principle here, and this game could have really used something like that on that level, and that you could have really emphasized the Breakthrough game mode here. So I'm not too sure what the hell these people are doing in the labs group, but clearly None of you know how to playtest the map, provide feedback. So you don't really need to exist at this point. Again, I'm just not too sure what they're doing in labs. Now, section 3, this village area, we've got some massive problems with this whole area. This feels like the map designer opened the asset browser, blacked out and said, fuck it. Every corner, every 2 seconds spent in this area needs to have gameplay. Now, in this remake, I don't know who is designing these maps. But it's screaming to me. That we have a bunch of people here.
I need a medic!
That have no idea what the fuck they're doing. Okay. They're over decorating these maps to compensate for how little work they actually have to do with this remake. So this section of the map has become its own full-fledged town, like you're in the favelas or some shit. But remembering, this is a Tajikistan-inspired remake of the rural China map, and looking at some reference images here, you can see what they were going for in terms of the building style. But again, you have to remember those philosophies around space and that less is more approach, because here they really needed those lessons. You are constantly surrounded by buildings on top of buildings, rooms on top of rooms, fences, rocks, shrubs, rubble piles, broken walls, barriers, crates, ladders, cables, fully grown trees in a 2 square meter garden, tin sheds and decorative junk all over the place. This isn't detail, this is constipation. This is the section where the remake's biggest problem get impossible to ignore, because every few meters something is in the way. Every time you aim, something is in the way. Every road has some little obstruction, some awkward piece of geometry, some corner, some bush, some collapsed piece of bullshit in the way. Some doors that's gonna open with 5 guys running out at any given moment. In theory, this all sounds great. More cover on the map to help the infantry. I get it. In practice, it's bullshit. Okay, this problem here has killed the entire game. Players don't really need strong positioning anymore. Okay, because in this area, they just need to hide in this shit and wait. That's what the map rewards. Okay, moving around is going to put you at a disadvantage. Okay, moving around is awkward, because the space is constantly arguing with you. Okay, you need to push forward, but there's a fence there. You want to flank, but there's a rock in the way. You want to use a vehicle, the map has decided your tank is now a shopping trolley. And this is where the village area really falls apart. Okay, vehicles have no breathing room, no room to maneuver tanks or light armor vehicles through the town. So you often have to smash through shit to get to where you want to go, and it's not exactly the best experience. This is supposed to be Golmud. Golmud should mean space. Armor should be able to move, rotate, pressure, retreat, and establish presence. In BF4, vehicles had room to think. A tank could control an approach. An IFV could support the infantry from a distance. Helicopters could influence the village because the village existed inside a larger and open ecosystem. In BF6, the village feels like it was built to actively stop vehicles. Okay, there is not enough clean maneuvering space. There's not enough readable approach lanes outside of this one lane central to the village. Okay, there's just not enough breathing room between cover clusters. And vehicles, they often get funneled, blocked, trapped, ambushed, or even forced into awkward little firing positions where they either farm one angle or they get swarmed from 6 different directions. And this is just not that combined arms gameplay. This is lame play is what this is, okay? Because you have to sit back and camp, and there's not really much of that Battlefield DNA in this experience, okay? Because the map keeps trying to reward infantry players. It keeps trying to make the infantry comfortable. But in doing so, it strangles that large-scale warfare Battlefield identity. And the map again seems fixated on proving that every interior space had someone living there. Okay, so TVs, cabinets, beds, sofas, kitchens, carpets, boxes, chairs, lighting. Yeah, I'm sorry, but are we a team of interior designers, or are we trying to make a Battlefield game here? Now again, it all looks visually impressive, but that's all adding additional geometry to the game which needs to be rendered in real time. And on a game as big as Battlefield, with 64-player huge war zones and destruction, with dynamic lighting and weather systems, etc., that's all a lot of stress on your performance. So if you don't have a supercomputer, this is going to blow your shit up. Your FPS, okay, it's going to tank your FPS and you start tweaking out, okay? This is why I simply cannot play this map. And again, the older games like BF4, BF3, they never had these issues. That breathing room, that lack of visual noise works to its advantage, not only visually in terms of art style, but also in terms of performance. Interiors were deliberately left vacant almost, and that was done to avoid taxing your performance. And most of those large-scale environments were terrain focused. I am to this day blown away by how well these games are optimized. Okay, you can literally run these games on an external hard drive, even with low memory, and the shit just works. Again, the original had a ton of breathing room. It was sparse, open fields with a nice upward push, some verticality there, a decent bunch of windows and rooftops for SMGs and snipers to guard long sight lines, because the map's length influenced your loadout. But all of that is completely missing here. The map favors SMGs because of how tight and compact the layout is. Now, Railway to Golmud, it takes place in Tajikistan following the wider conflict in the region. Narratively, the setup is PAX are trying to control key highways and rail lines that could choke NATO supply routes, so NATO deploys Dagger 13 using insider knowledge to hunt them down. And you compare that to BF4 narratively, that is pretty weak. And again, that all supports the notion that things just aren't as big as Battlefield 4's version. We no longer have two massive, powerful armies destroying each other here. Instead, we now have a PMC fighting NATO, and they've recycled skins from the campaign. It's great that we have 64-player breakthrough and conquest, but the factions just don't feel as big. The battle doesn't feel as big, and the asset congestion makes the map feel smaller, okay? And that's taking into account whether or not the system that you have can even run this constipation. So again, all in all, what they've created here is very pretty, but this problem resurfaces in every single map, okay? So there is space, map layouts are condensed, and there's too much asset congestion. So essentially, that's a reoccurring pattern that they have to deal with in every single layout in this project. So if they fix those three issues, this might start to feel like a true Battlefield title, and less like a COD/Medal of Honor style hybrid. And that's really annoying, because they seem to have resolved many of these issues with Fort Linden. Again, there's plenty of space there, even some form of levolution. The reason that whole experience was so much better than what we have in the core experience is because that was made by entirely different studio. Okay, so what I think we need to do is get that studio developing this project, okay, because obviously they understand what they're doing. And I think it's quite strange that they haven't added Fort Linden to the base game. I don't know if that's just them being lazy or they just completely tone deaf. But again, it feeds the perception that they just don't know what they're doing. But anyway, that's going to do it for this one, guys. I will see you on the next one.